A fetus is not a person until it can sustain life without the mother's life. Why is it that a baby isn't assigned a social security number until after they are born? Because it's after they are born that there is another person. A heartbeat doesn't make a person a person. That's why heartbeat bills are stupid. So this person brings up a really good question. Is a fetus a person? When Roe v. Wade was decided, it happened prior to the advancement of medical imaging technology and genetics research. When these technologies finally became available, it was made abundantly clear that an embryo or a fetus or a human in a developmental stage had the same genetic matter as a human at any other stage of development. There was also a commonality in form between an embryo and a human. Also, an embryo is clearly the product of the reproduction of two other humans, and there's no case in recorded history of a human embryo developing into anything other than a human. So with these facts being made clear by technology, the argument that an embryo is just a clump of cells, that argument no longer is valid. So the abortion industry needed a new idea, a new argument to put forth, and it seems like they found one in an ideology called personhood, which seems to be represented in that comment that I read from that person at the beginning of this video. Although I don't want to jump to conclusions, I'm honestly not sure if that comment was from a person or for a human. But anyways, I need some clarification on this topic of personhood. This is new for me, and in the quick research, I had to throw this video together pretty quickly this week. But in the research I did, I could not find a single reference of the word or the idea of personhood that predated the year 1940. I couldn't find any reference to personhood in the Enlightenment, in the Middle Ages, in antiquity. If I'm wrong about that, please correct me in the comments. But if I'm right about that, then this idea of personhood seems to come from exactly the same time or just after the time period of eugenics. What is this idea of personhood? Well, this idea of personhood wants to separate being a human from being a person. A human does not necessarily mean that you're a person. So being a human is a biological term, and being a person is a moral term. And looking for examples to try to explain this, I could not find a single example that wasn't a fictional character. I saw examples of Superman, who is a person, but he's not a human. Wally, who is a person, but he's not a human. And the only other example that I could find that wasn't a fictional character was embryos. So it seems as though this idea were created just for the purpose of justifying abortions. Not to get off track here, but Aristotle and Aquinas dealt with this issue of fictional characters. They differentiated between the idea of existence and the idea of substance. Superman does have substance, but his substance does not have existence. But back to the idea of personhood. Philosopher Mary Ann Warren, who was born 2,300 years after Aristotle, taught that there are 5 conditions for a being to be a person. They are consciousness, reasoning, self-motivated activity, capacity to communicate, and self-awareness. Now, 2 comments about this list. First, it's a really good list. I actually like this list. If I were to come up with a list of criteria for personhood, I would probably use these exact same 5 things. But you probably wouldn't. You probably would only use 4 of those, or you might want to add a 6th. And that's the point. It's completely subjective. There's nothing about that list that comes from science or reason or from natural law. It's just something someone came up with in the year 19 whatever to determine whether or not somebody was a person. What about all of the persons or non-persons who lived between Aristotle and Mary Ann Warren? How are they supposed to know whether or not they were persons? Second, this criteria can be used to eliminate a bunch of humans who have advanced beyond the embryonic stage of development. I've just made a quick list. Number 1 eliminates people who are in a coma. Number 2 can potentially eliminate people with special needs. Number 3 eliminates most teenagers. Number 4 eliminates Helen Keller and most children below the age of 18 months. as does number 5. Need I mention that New York just passed a law legalizing abortion up to birth? Do you see how policy follows ideology? The subjectiveness of personhood could lead to the legal killing of anyone. So where did the term personhood come from? This has been the strategy of cultural progressives throughout history. In order to build some version of utopia that they've dreamed up, they always start by redefining terms, changing the language, moving ideas from objective to subjective. In this confusion over what is right and wrong, they're able to move in and advance their agenda. Now, this one point demands so much more be said of it, but for time, it's enough to say that this ambiguity about the dignity of the human person allows for racists to justify slavery, Hitler to justify the Holocaust, noted English playwright George Bernard Shaw to say something like, a great many people would have to be put out of existence simply because it wastes other people's time to look after them. Eugenicist Margaret Sanger and founder of Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in the world, said, we don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. FYI, guess which neighborhoods Planned Parenthoods are typically built in? Now, these numbers are always in contention and there's always heated debates online, but the latest numbers that I saw said that 88% of Planned Parenthoods, they weren't built in white neighborhoods. But I'm sure that's just a coincidence, and it has nothing to do with the quote that the founder said about exterminating. Nominalism is this idea that names don't really mean anything, that a ball is just a ball because we call it a ball. We could easily call it a phone. Now, in the case of a ball, nominalism doesn't have much consequence, but in the case of human dignity, nominalism can have disastrous effects like abortion, euthanasia, slavery, racism, etc., etc. 2,300 years ago, Aristotle, who was not a Christian and never read the Bible, determined that real things, including humans, were in fact real, and we could know they were real from 4 causes, and I hinted at those at the beginning of this video. Using these 4 causes in conjunction with modern medical science, we can determine exactly what a human is. But what happens when you don't use all 4 causes? This. So I'm in a meeting, a really, really important meeting with a lot of really important people, when all of a sudden my phone completely blows up.